I found my husband in our living room with my son's fiancée only a few hours before the wedding. I was about to confront him, but a movement in the hallway stopped me. It was my son, Kai. His face was a mask of stone. He looked at me and whispered, "Mom, I already know, and it's worse than you think. Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I start my story, I'd love to know what city you're joining me from. Feel free to share it in the comments. Now let me immerse you in this story. On the morning of my son's wedding, I woke up at 5 o'clock. I couldn't sleep. I told myself it was just nerves, the kind any mother feels on such an important day. I sat here in this very home office, staring at spreadsheets on my computer screen. I run a small design consultancy from home. Nothing extravagant, but it helped pay for our son Kai's college and covered the extras that my husband Marcus's salary didn't quite reach. The numbers on the screen were a blur. My mind was somewhere else entirely. Outside, the world was still dark and silent, but I could already picture the scene that would unfold on the patio of our Dallas, Texas estate in just a few hours. White chairs arranged in perfect rows on the lawn. I had spent the entire spring tending to the arch that Marcus had built, covering it with the rose bushes I had nurtured since they were tiny buds. I had checked the string lights 3 times myself, making sure not a single bulb was out. Everything had to be perfect. Our son, our Kai, deserved a perfect day. 25 years of marriage to Marcus, 23 years raising Kai. I had dedicated my entire life to this family. I had been the steady hand, the planner, the one who remembered dental appointments and birthdays and made sure the bills were paid on time. Marcus was the charmer, the life of the party, the one everyone loved. I was the foundation he leaned on, and for a long time that was enough for me. But lately, something had felt off. A silent distance had settled between us. It was in the way he would stop talking when I walked into a room. In the way his phone was always tilted away from me. When I asked if something was wrong, he would simply laugh it off. "Just work, honey," he'd say. Big promotion on the line. I chose to believe him. What else could I do? You don't toss 25 years of history overboard because of a feeling. Click of the office door brought me back to the present. It was Kai standing there in his pajamas, a mug of coffee in his hand. He looked exhausted with dark circles under his eyes. At his age, he had my practical nature but his father's handsome features. "Mom, you've been up for hours," he said. "The wedding isn't until 4 o'clock. "I just want everything to be perfect for my boy," I said, attempting a cheerful smile as I closed my laptop. "Your dad is still sleeping." "He left early," Kai said with a strange note in his voice. He walked over and sat on the edge of my desk, suddenly looking much younger. He said something about picking up a gift for Serafina's parents, the Sterlings. I frowned. That was new to me. "Mom," he said, hesitating. "Can I ask you something?" I turned my chair to face him. Under the harsh light of my desk lamp, his worry was evident. "What's on your mind, sweetie?" He took a deep breath. "Do you think Serafina really loves me?" Question hit me like a punch to the gut. Serafina, his fiancée, ambitious, beautiful, a young architect from a wealthy, lifelong family with influence. On the surface, she was everything we had always wanted for Kai. But I'd had my own doubts. I had seen how her eyes would sometimes drift when Kai talked about his passions, how she checked her phone during family dinners. "Why would you ask that, honey? It's your wedding day." "I know, and maybe it's just last-minute jitters," he mumbled, staring into his coffee. "But sometimes when she looks at me, I feel like she's looking right through me. Like I'm just a box she needed to check off on her way to the perfect life." He paused. "And lately, she's been spending a lot of time with Dad. They're always talking about finances, investments. She says he's mentoring her." I wanted to tell him about the things I had also noticed. How Marcus's eyes followed Serafina around the room. How he always found excuses to help her with her coat or refill her drink. How he knew exactly how she liked her coffee. 2 sugars and a splash of milk without having to ask. Instead, I reached out and squeezed his hand. Wedding jitters are normal, sweetie. Marriage is the biggest step you'll ever take. It's not just jitters, Mom, he said, his voice breaking. He finally looked up at me, his eyes filled with a pain that terrified me. I think she's in love with someone else. I froze, the blood turned to ice. What makes you say that? Little things, he whispered. The way she lights up when Dad calls. How she always asks about him first when she comes over. I saw them in the garden yesterday just talking. And the way he looked at her. It wasn't how a father-in-law should look at his son's fiancée. I felt a flush rise up my neck. I forced my voice to stay steady. Kai, that's a very serious accusation. I know, he said, shrugging. And I hope I'm wrong. God, I hope I'm wrong. Before I could reply, the door opened again. It was Marcus. He was already dressed in an impeccable shirt and dress slacks, looking immaculate as always. Well, look at my 2 favorite people, he exclaimed, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He seemed surprised to see Kai there. Big day, son. You should be getting ready. He turned his attention to me. And you, Naomi, you're going to wear yourself out. Serafina just called. She's coming by around 10 o'clock to discuss some last-minute seating chart details. I watched Kai's expression tighten. What details? He asked. Oh, just making sure her parents don't sit next to your Uncle David after that political argument last Christmas, Marcus said with a dismissive wave. You know how special her family is. We should discuss it privately because of the politics and all that. Of course, Kai said, his voice flat. We can't have the wrong people sitting together. Tension in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I watched my husband and my son, and I knew deep in my soul that Kai wasn't wrong. Something was terribly, horribly wrong. After Marcus and Kai left my office, a cold dread seized me. I was supposed to have a final call with the caterer at 10:30, a call I had been planning for weeks. I picked up the phone, my hand trembling slightly, and called them. I told them I had a family emergency and needed to reschedule. It was a lie. Truth was I had cleared my entire morning. I couldn't shake Kai's words, nor the nauseating feeling that Marcus's false cheer had provoked. Something was happening in my house today. And for the first time in 25 years, I intended to find out what it was. I spent the next 2 hours pretending to be busy. I tidied the kitchen, which was already spotless. I rearranged the floral centerpieces on the dining room table. Every sound made me jump. Every passing car made my heart hammer against my ribs. I felt like an actress in a play performing the role of the happy mother of the groom. While inside, I twisted with anxiety. Exactly at 10 o'clock, a sleek white BMW pulled into our driveway, Serafina's car. I watched from the kitchen window as she stepped out. Even in simple jeans and a blouse, she looked like she belonged on a magazine cover. She walked up to the front door with the natural confidence of someone who knows she belongs. My heart was beating so loud I could hear it in my ears. I crept out the back door and circled the house, crouching low behind the large wisteria bushes that bordered our living room windows. I felt ridiculous, like a spy in my own home. But the need to know, the need to confirm my fears or dispel them was overwhelming. Through the large bay window, I could see them. Marcus had let her in, and they were standing by the fireplace, the spot where we took our family pictures every Christmas. He was pouring her a drink. I couldn't hear their words, but their body language said it all. They stood close. Too close. His hand rested low on her back. It was a casual gesture, one that could be easily explained away, but it lingered there for a second too long. I clenched my hands into fists, my nails digging into my palms. 25 years we had built a life in this house. We had read stories to Kai on that very sofa. We had hosted countless family parties in that room. And now my husband was standing there caressing another woman, my son's fiancée, on our son's wedding day. I was about to stand up to storm in like a fury and confront them right then and there. I didn't care about the scene. I didn't care about the wedding. I only cared about the scorching betrayal I was witnessing. But then I noticed movement in the upstairs hallway, a shadow in the glass's reflection. I looked closer. It was Kai. He was standing at the top of the stairs, hidden in the shadows, watching them too. The sight of him, so still and broken, stopped me cold. This wasn't just my pain. It was his. Downstairs, things had escalated. Serafina's hand was now on Marcus's chest. She leaned into him, her head tilted back, a smile playing on her lips. She said something and he laughed. It was a sound I hadn't heard from him in years. Light, genuine, happy, the way he used to laugh with me when we were young and everything seemed possible. In that moment, I saw my husband transform into someone I didn't recognize. Someone alive in a way he hadn't been with me for a long, long time. Then his hands were in her hair and they were kissing. It wasn't a quick peck. It was a deep, passionate kiss, the kind you see in movies. My vision went red. A roar filled my ears. I took a step toward the house, ready to rip the door from its hinges, ready to scream until my lungs gave out. And then a hand gripped my arm. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Kai. He had slipped out of the house and come to find me. His face was pale, ashen, but his eyes burned with a cold, hard determination I had never seen before. "Mom, don't," he whispered, his voice strained. "Not yet, Kai. This is..." I choked on the words. I couldn't even say it. "I know what it is," he said. His voice was steady, though I could see his hands trembling. "Mom, I've known for weeks. Weeks." The word came out as a strangled whisper. I stared at my son, the boy I had raised, who now looked at me with the eyes of a man who had seen too much. We were still crouched behind the wisteria. The beautiful flowers I'd been so proud of were now serving as a hiding place for the destruction of our family. Inside the house, my husband and my son's fiancée had moved from the fireplace to the sofa. I couldn't bear to look. "I didn't want to believe it at first," Kai said, his voice low and urgent. "I kept making excuses for them. He's just being kind. She's just nervous about joining the family." But it kept happening. The lingering looks, the private conversations, the way she lit up whenever he was near. He corrected himself. The slip-up, a painful reminder of a life that no longer existed. She was supposed to be getting a new mother figure, not a rival. "I mean, Serafina, why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of shock and a strange protective rage. "You shouldn't have had to carry this alone." "Because I needed proof," he said, his jaw clenched. "And because," he looked at me, his eyes much older than his 23 years. "I wanted to give them enough rope to hang themselves." He pulled out his phone. His hand shook slightly as he tapped the screen. "I hired someone," he confessed. "What did you do?" "What?" "I'm not stupid, Mom. For I saw them having lunch together a month ago. A lunch Dad told me was a business meeting and she told me was an afternoon shopping with her girlfriends. I knew I wasn't crazy. I needed to know the truth." He handed me the phone. "I hired a private investigator." My breath hitched. "A detective. Kai, the money." "Don't worry about the money," he said grimly. "It was worth every single cent." The first photo on the screen showed Marcus and Serafina walking into the Ritz-Carlton Dallas downtown. Timestamp indicated it was 3 weeks ago, a Tuesday afternoon when Marcus was supposedly at a regional sales conference. The second photo showed them leaving together 2 hours later, looking heated and disheveled. "There are 17 different occasions," Kai said quietly as I scrolled through a gallery of betrayal. Photos of them in dimly lit restaurants across the city. Photos of them pressed up against Marcus's car in a private parking lot. Photos of them laughing, holding hands, living a completely different life behind our backs. I felt sick. The sheer magnitude of the deceit was breathtaking. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a calculated, long-term affair. I stood up again. A fresh wave of rage washed over me. "We're stopping this," I said, my voice like steel. "Right now." "No." Kai's voice was sharp, making me crouch down again. "Mom, trust me. I have a plan." "A plan, Kai. This is insane. We can't just let the wedding." "Absolutely we can," he cut in, his voice ringing with an authority I'd never heard from him before. "And we will." "Mom, think about it. If we confront them now, what happens? They'll deny it. They'll twist it. Dad will say you're being hysterical, that you're misunderstanding things. Serafina will cry and play the victim. They'll turn it all back on us." He was right. I could already hear Marcus's smooth, placating voice. "Naomi, you're overreacting. She's a nervous young woman, and I was just offering paternal advice." "So, what do you suggest?" I whispered, my anger giving way to a cold, terrifying clarity. Kai's smile was something chilling and unfamiliar. "Public humiliation," he said, the words hanging in the air between us. "Total and absolute destruction of their reputations. Legal consequences. We don't just end this, Mom. We make sure they can never ever do this to anyone again." I looked at my son. When had he become so calculating, so ruthless? Then I looked back through the window. I saw my husband, the man I had loved and trusted for a quarter of a century, start to unbutton Serafina's blouse on the sofa where we had built our family. And in that moment, I knew the woman I used to be, the understanding, forgiving wife, was gone. She had died right there in the dirt behind the flowers I had so painstakingly planted. "Tell me the plan," I said. That evening was one of the strangest of my life. Marcus came home acting as if nothing had happened, asking about final catering arrangements. Serafina had left hours before, and he was the picture of the loving husband and proud father. He talked about his speech for the reception, about how proud he was of Kai. The hypocrisy was so thick I could barely breathe. I just nodded and smiled, an empty shell of myself, while inside I screamed. After Marcus went to bed, Kai and I met in my home office. The door was locked, the blinds drawn. Felt like a war room, and in many ways it was. On my desk lay the beginnings of a file of evidence that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. "Tell me about that detective," I said, studying a surveillance photo that turned my stomach. "Her name is Leah," Kai said. "Leah Peterson." The name hit me like a splash of cold water. "Leah. My sister. Leah." Kai nodded. I didn't know who else to call. I knew she was a cop for 20 years before retiring and starting her own PI agency. I knew she was smart and she'd be discreet. He looked a little sheepish. I also knew she never really liked Dad. I let out a short, sharp laugh that sounded more like a sob. My little sister Leah. We were close, but I hadn't told her about the growing distance with Marcus. I had been too proud, too ashamed to admit my marriage might be failing. "I'll call her," I said, my voice thick with emotion. Leah answered on the second ring. "Naomi, it's past midnight. Is everything okay?" "No, Leah, nothing is okay." And then the dam broke. I told her everything, what Kai suspected, what we had witnessed that morning, the photos. I cried ugly, choked sobs for the first time all day. She listened patiently, her voice calm and firm on the other end of the line. There was no shock or surprise, just a grim acceptance. "I'm not surprised, Naomi," she said quietly when I finished. "I've seen the way he looks at that girl. I was hoping I was wrong. Kai told me about the photos," I said, wiping my eyes. "What else do you have?" "More than you probably want to know." Her voice turned professional. "I've been tracking their movements for 3 weeks. They meet twice a week like clockwork at the Ritz-Carlton Dallas. He always pays in cash. They eat lunch at fancy restaurants he'd never take you to. Last week, he took her to Tiffany." I felt that flash of rage again. Our money. The money I managed so carefully. The money that was supposed to be for our retirement, for our future. Naomi, Leah's voice was soft. There's more now. Something bigger. I've been digging into Marcus's financials, trying to figure out where all this cash for the hotel rooms and gifts is coming from. He's been sloppy. What did you find? I asked, dreading the answer. There was a long pause on the line. It's not just Serafina, she said, voice heavy. It's not the first time. I found a series of regular monthly payments going back 15 years, always to the same person, a woman named Teresa Allen. The name meant nothing to me. Who is she? I did some digging. She was a junior associate at his old firm when Kai was a child. She left abruptly about 15 years ago. The payment started a few months after she left. Leah took a deep breath. Naomi. She has a daughter, a 15-year-old girl named Chloe. I ran a background check. The father isn't listed on the birth certificate, but I'd bet my license that Marcus is her father. The phone felt heavy in my hand. I couldn't breathe. A daughter, an entire other child, 15 years of lies, 15 years of a double life. The secret trips, the inexplicable expenses, the emotional distance, it all clicked into horrible clarity. I have to know for sure, Leah, I whispered. I know, she said. I'll handle it. But Naomi, you have to be prepared. When this drops, it's going to be a nuclear bomb. I know, I said, my voice cold and hard. That's exactly what we're counting on. The 24 hours leading up to the wedding were a blur of calculated deception. I moved through the preparations like a ghost, my body on autopilot while my mind raced. I smiled at relatives. I approved the final table settings with the wedding planner. I even helped Marcus with his tie, my fingers brushing the silk fabric as I imagined tightening it around his neck. Every interaction was a performance, every polite word a lie. Leah worked quickly. She was a professional, and this was now personal. She told me she had a contact at a private lab. It's risky, Naomi, but if we can get a clean DNA sample from Marcus, we can get a non-legal preliminary comparison to a sample from the girl. That night, after Marcus fell asleep, snoring softly beside me in the bed we had shared for a quarter-century, I crept out of the room. My heart pounded with every creak of the floorboard. I went to the bathroom and took his toothbrush from its holder. My hand shook so badly I almost dropped it. Felt like the ultimate violation. But what was this compared to the violations he had committed against me, against our family? I carefully tucked it into a plastic bag and left it in the mailbox for Leah to collect before dawn. The next day, as the house buzzed with the chaotic energy of florists and photographers, Leah called. I've got more on the money, she said, her voice grim. It's worse than we thought. We met in my car, parked on the street, away from the house, the only place I felt safe to talk. She opened a laptop and turned it toward me. On the screen was a spreadsheet, a dizzying array of numbers and dates. I did a full analysis of your joint accounts, your retirement funds, everything, she said, pointing to a highlighted column. Look at the pattern. 4 years, Marcus has been making regular cash withdrawals, small amounts, 500 here, 700 there, never more than 1,000 at a time, always from different branches. I thought it was for his hobby, I said, stunned. He always told me he was investing in rare coins, something that required cash transactions. Another lie. His hobby was named Serafina, Leah said dryly. Cash for the hotel rooms, the expensive dinners, the gifts, that Tiffany necklace. He paid for half of it in cash, but that's not the worst part. She clicked another tab. He's been taking loans out against your pension plan. I stared at the screen. There it was in black and white. A series of loans taken out against the retirement account I had so diligently contributed to from my small business. The account that was supposed to be our safety net, our security for old age. He had drained almost $60,000 in the last 18 months. How? I whispered. He would have needed my signature. He forged it, Leah said quietly. I compared the signature on the loan documents to your signature on your tax returns. It's a good forgery, but it's not yours. A wave of nausea hit me. This was beyond deceit. This was theft. He wasn't just breaking my heart. He was systematically dismantling our future piece by piece to fund his sordid affair. He was robbing me of the college fund we had built, of the life we were supposed to share. He was gambling with my entire future. And Serafina? I asked, my voice barely audible. She's not an innocent victim, Leah said, her gaze hard. I'll get to her, but first there's something else. She hesitated. Then she handed me a large manila envelope. The preliminary DNA results came in this morning. My hands began to shake as I opened it. I scanned the page. The scientific jargon blurred until I found the conclusion at the bottom of the page. Probability of paternity 99.999%. I stared at the words until they were burned into my memory. Chloe Allen was Marcus's daughter. 15 years. 15 years of loving him, trusting him, building a life with him while he had another daughter, another family hidden in the shadows. I rested my head on the steering wheel, the cool leather against my hot forehead. I didn't cry. I was beyond tears. A strange, terrifying calm came over me. Pain was still there, a massive gaping wound in my chest. But now it was accompanied by something else. Cold, hard resolve. He wasn't just going to lose his wife. He was going to lose everything. Sitting in the car with my sister, that flimsy piece of paper in my hand felt heavier than a tombstone. It was the death certificate of my marriage, of the life I thought I had. A 15-year-old daughter. The words echoed in the silent car. How? How did you find her? I finally managed to ask, my voice sounding distant and strange to my own ears. Leah's expression was a mix of pity and professional resolve. It started with the payments. Once I had Teresa Allen's name. It wasn't hard to locate her. She lives just 2 towns over. Naomi about 20 minutes away. 20 minutes. For 15 years, he had been living a secret life a short drive away. How many times had he told me he was working late? How many business dinners had he attended? How many weekend golf trips had he taken? My mind spun as I mentally reviewed years of excuses and lies, each one now taking on a new sinister meaning. I swung by the house yesterday morning, Leah continued, her voice soft. I posed as a market researcher. Teresa opened the door and behind her I saw the girl, Chloe. Naomi. She's the spitting image of him. The same dark, intelligent eyes that first drew me to him all those years ago. The same smile. She's unmistakable. I imagined it. An innocent teenager in all this who looked just like my husband. A sister my son never knew he had. The thought was so surreal, so monstrous that I couldn't fully process it. My family wasn't just broken. It was a fraud, a carefully constructed lie that I had unknowingly helped maintain for more than half my life. Does the Mother Teresa know about me? About Kai? I asked. I can't say for sure, Leah admitted. But the way she lives, a nice house in a good school district, but no flashy career, it's clear Marcus is her primary source of financial support. She has every reason to keep things quiet. He wasn't just paying child support, Naomi. He was funding her whole life with my money, with our money, my consulting money, our joint savings, the money he stole from our retirement. The betrayal was so deep, so layered. I felt like I was drowning. It was a systematic plunder of my life's work, my trust, and my future. I handed the DNA report back to Leah. Put it with the rest of the evidence, I said. My voice, stripped of emotion, was numb. The shock was so profound, it had short-circuited my ability to feel anything but a cold, heavy emptiness. I thought about that girl, Chloe. What kind of man tells his daughter he can't acknowledge her? What kind of man raises one son in the light while keeping another child hidden in the dark? Cruelty, not just to me and Kai, but to this innocent girl, was astonishing. And what about Serafina? I asked, needing to shift my focus to latch onto a target for the anger that was starting to melt the ice in my veins. You said there was more on her. Leah nodded, her expression hardening again. Right, Serafina, let's talk about the fiancé. She turned the laptop back to me and opened a new file. She's not just sleeping with your husband. She's been embezzling funds from her law firm. The words took a moment to register. She's a junior partner at a prestigious downtown firm, Leah explained, displaying documents that looked like internal financial reports. She's been inflating expense reports, creating fake invoices for non-existent consultants, and siphoning the money into a private bank account. They aren't large amounts each time, but it's steady. In the last year, she's stolen over $200,000. I gasped. $200,000? And I can trace some of that money directly to gifts for Marcus, Leah said, showing me a bank transfer, followed by a credit card statement that showed the purchase of a $1,000 watch. She was stealing from her partners to buy gifts for her lover, who was stealing from his wife to buy gifts for her. It's the most perfectly disgusting circle of deceit I've ever seen. So Serafina wasn't just a homewrecker. She was a criminal, a thief, and she was about to marry my son, bringing her corruption and lies into the heart of what was left of my family. The numbness in my chest vanished, replaced by a white-hot fury. This wasn't just about a broken heart anymore. This was about protecting my son. This was about justice. This was about making sure these two people faced the consequences for every lie, every dollar, every broken promise. Okay, I said, looking my sister in the eye. The wedding plan. Let's go over it one more time. I want it to be perfect. The knowledge of Serafina's embezzlement added a dark, criminal layer to the already stunning betrayal. Changed everything. This was no longer just a messy, heartbreaking domestic drama. It was a conspiracy of fraud and theft perpetrated by the two people who should have been closest to us. How did you get all this? I asked Leah, pointing to the damning financial documents on her laptop screen. We were still in my car, the air thick with the smell of conspiracy and stale coffee. Serafina isn't as smart as she thinks, Leah said with grim satisfaction. She got careless. And I have friends on the police force who were willing to pull some strings when they heard the story. A buddy of mine on the Economic Crimes Unit took one look at these patterns and knew exactly what he was seeing. She pointed to the screen. She was moving the money through a shell corporation she set up using her mother's maiden name. It was amateur. I thought of Serafina's parents, the Sterlings. They were pillars of the community. Her father was a respected federal judge. Her mother was on the board of 3 different charities. They moved in circles where reputation was everything. They believed their daughter was a shining star on the rise, marrying into a good, stable family. They had no idea their golden girl was a thief, and the stable family she was marrying into was a house of cards built on lies. Public humiliation was going to destroy them, too. For a fleeting instant, I felt a pang of pity for them. They were innocent collateral damage, but that feeling was quickly extinguished by the fire of my own betrayal. So Marcus is stealing our retirement money to buy gifts for his mistress, I summarized, the words tasting like venom. And Serafina is stealing from her firm to buy gifts for my husband, her lover, who is also her future father-in-law. I shook my head in disbelief. This is movie stuff. It gets better, Leah said, a dry twist to her lips. Some of the money Marcus took out of your pension plan, he invested in a sure-thing real estate deal, Serafina recommended to him. Let me guess, I said, my voice dripping sarcasm. The deal fell through. The deal never existed, Leah confirmed. The money went straight into that secret account of hers. She was stealing from him, too. He was so blinded by his own ego and infatuation that he never even saw it. I had to laugh. It was a bitter, joyless sound. My brilliant, charming husband, the man who always thought he was the smartest person in the room, was being conned by a 20-something embezzler. It was almost poetic. We spent another hour going over the evidence Leah had collected. She had everything: bank statements, surveillance photos, cash-paid hotel receipts, forged loan documents, and now a full criminal file on Serafina's activities that was ready to be handed to the prosecutor. And of course, the DNA report, the irrefutable proof that cemented 15 years of deceit. I looked at the file, the neat tabs and organized pages that represented the complete demolition of my life. 25 years of marriage reduced to a stack of incriminating documents on the passenger seat of my car. Suddenly, a wave of exhaustion washed over me. So deep it felt like a physical weight pressing on my chest. The wedding was set to begin. Everything was beautiful. The white chairs were perfectly aligned. The arch was covered in blooming roses. The string lights twinkled. All the guests were in their seats. I stood with Kai near the aisle and I saw the look in his eyes. He wasn't nervous. He was a predator waiting for his prey. The music swelled and the congregation stood up. The massive double doors opened and Serafina walked in on her father's arm. She looked radiant, a vision in white. She smiled at her father, she smiled at the guests, and she finally looked at her groom, my son, Kai. Her smile faltered for a second as she saw the cold determination in his eyes. She walked down the aisle, completely unaware that she was walking into a trap set by the two people she had tried to destroy. I watched Marcus, too. He was standing at the front, beaming, the picture of the proud father of the groom. He was ready to give a toast about love and fidelity. The hypocrisy made me want to scream, but I held it in. The ceremony proceeded. It was a mockery. The minister spoke of everlasting love, of commitment, of trust. I was standing there, listening to all the beautiful lies. Kai and Serafina stood before the minister, ready to exchange vows. Serafina had tears in her eyes, tears of joy or perhaps tears of deceit. The minister cleared his throat. "Do you, Kai, take this woman Serafina to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Kai took a deep breath. His eyes met mine. He was ready. "I do not," Kai said, his voice ringing out clear and steady, amplified by the microphone. The sound was deafening. The silence that followed was even worse. A collective gasp rose from the guests. Serafina's head whipped around, her face registering shock, then hurt, then pure, unadulterated terror. The minister was frozen, his mouth agape. Marcus was the first to move. "What are you doing, son?" he hissed, grabbing Kai's arm. Kai gently pulled away. "I'm telling the truth, Dad. Something you never taught me to do." He looked at Serafina, and his eyes were full of a terrible pity. "Serafina, I can't marry you. I know about you and my father." The second gasp from the crowd was louder than the first. Serafina stumbled back, her hand flying to her mouth. "What are you talking about, Kai? You're hysterical. It's the pressure." "It's not true." Marcus stepped forward, his eyes burning with fury. "Kai, stop this immediately. You're ruining everything." "I'm saving everything, Dad," Kai corrected. He turned to the crowd, his voice gaining strength. "I want you all to know that this wedding is off, because Serafina has been having a long-term affair with her future father-in-law, my father, Marcus." The guests erupted. Shouts, gasps, crying. Serafina's mother fainted. Marcus grabbed Kai again, but I was there instantly. I put my hand on Marcus's chest and pushed him back. My eyes were cold steel. "Don't you dare touch him, Marcus. Your cheating days are over." Serafina ran down the aisle, sobbing, her father trying to catch her. Kai watched them go, but he wasn't finished. "And for all of you who were worried about the financial future of this couple," Kai continued, his voice cutting through the noise, "I want you to know that the woman who is about to marry me is an embezzler who is wanted for questioning by the police. She has been stealing money from her law firm for years." That precise moment, Leah and a uniformed officer, who was an old colleague of hers, stepped out from the side entrance. Leah walked straight up to Serafina's father, who was leaning over his wife. She showed him a warrant. Serafina's father turned pale, looking from the warrant to his daughter, who was now being questioned by the officer. Marcus was stunned, completely speechless. He looked at me, then at Kai, realizing that he was completely and utterly trapped. "And for you, Dad," Kai said, his voice dropping to a low, lethal whisper. "Mom and I have all the evidence of your financial theft from her retirement funds, your forgery, and the fact that you have a secret 15-year-old daughter named Chloe." The look on Marcus's face was priceless. It was a mixture of terror, shock, and defeat. He collapsed into the nearest chair. The wedding was over. The family was shattered. But in the ruin, Kai and I had found a strange new strength. The next few months were a whirlwind of lawyers, police reports, and uncomfortable conversations. Serafina was charged and her parents were disgraced. Marcus was forced to settle with me. My lawyer made sure he gave up the house, the vast majority of our assets, and his share of my retirement fund due to the evidence of forgery and theft. Criminal case for the forgery was dropped on the condition that he fully cooperate with the divorce and a massive payout, a penalty I was glad to impose. I filed for divorce, and it was surprisingly quick and quiet. He was a broken man, stripped of his pride and his fortune. I had gained the house, my freedom, and more money than I expected. Kai went back to his life, a new man. He was hurt, but he was free. He took a job at a non-profit, something he was truly passionate about. I finally reached out to Teresa Allen and her daughter, Chloe. It was a difficult meeting, full of tears and awkward silences. Chloe was a sweet girl who was confused and angry. She deserved better. I didn't know what kind of relationship we would have, but I knew I couldn't abandon her. She was Kai's half-sister, and she was my husband's other victim. A year later, Marcus tried to see Kai, but Kai refused. He said he needed more time. Marcus lost his job, his reputation, and his entire circle of friends. He ended up moving across the country to live a quiet life. I finally bought my own place, a small condo in Miami. It was a beautiful place, a sanctuary. I had finally learned to drive, bought myself a little Mazda, and never looked back. Marcus filed for divorce almost immediately after the wedding fiasco, a surprisingly quiet affair. He sent a letter a year later, apologizing for the pain he caused me, Kai, and Chloe. I listened and I knew he meant it. But an apology couldn't erase 25 years of deceit. "I forgive you, Marcus," I said. And I was surprised to find I actually meant it. Not for you, but for me. I can't carry that anger anymore. It's too heavy. I looked him in the eye. "But I will never trust you again. We can never go back." He nodded, a sheen of tears in his eyes. "I know," he whispered, and then he left. That night, as I got ready for bed, I found myself thinking about the woman I was a year ago, crouched in the dirt behind the wisteria. She was so broken, so lost. I wished I could go back and tell her that everything would be okay, that the pain wasn't the end of the story. The family I thought I had was a lie, shattered into a million pieces on that sunny afternoon. But what Kai, Chloe, and I built in its place was smaller, quieter, and imperfect. But it was honest. It wasn't built on comfortable lies, but on a difficult, painful, and ultimately freeing truth. We had lost everything, but in doing so, we had found something real. And for the first time in a long, long time, that felt like enough. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks, so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.